the story like the back of my hand, 'cause I've heard it all before. You always say that you're the one that's in demand, and I don't know the score. Times that you have tried to play the game, trying to have things your own way. It's led to nothing and things still remain the same, and I don't wanna play. See that this is not the way to be, and the time has come to choose. If it comes down to a fight between you and me, then you are doomed to lose.
The red flag flying here.
Hello and welcome to Socialist Think Tank, and we have a very special edition tonight. We have some working class students from Durham University. Now, a lot of you will know that education is supposed to be something that improves society, that improves local areas, and Durham University itself should be providing that service locally. But we have heard increasing stories. We've heard stories about miners versus police. We've heard stories about people who are being quite snobbish towards working class people. And tonight we're going to hear some of those very real stories. So please do get involved in this show. Please do comment. And I'm going to introduce our students who I'm really grateful for coming. They're going to be absolutely brilliant. Firstly, the first person is Lucy, who I actually inspired this because I saw Lucy's article on this and I thought this would be an absolutely brilliant idea for a show. So Lucy, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Lucy and I'm a second year student at Durham studying criminology, and basically I've just found there's a lot of prejudice at the university towards not only working class students but even northern students, just purely down to their accents. And it's just, we've been working together, this group, to try and tackle that, and we've been talking about it, and we're hoping this is the beginning of a conversation that needs to happen, basically.
Excellent. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing this as well, by the way. And I know that there's other people who've been on the show in the past from Durham University. We do have a really good working class tradition here. It's not like it's just a new thing. It's always been there, but so have the issues. I'm going to come to Jamie next.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jamie. I'm president of the Working Class Society at Durham, and I'm from Liverpool and East London.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll hear more from you later. And I think I will now come to Aoifke.
Hi, I'm Aoifke, so I'm a second year studying English at Durham. I'm at Van Mildert College, and the main reason why I'm here is because Lucy got in contact with me. So I posted a poem on my Twitter about like experiences at Durham, and it got quite a bit of attention, which was really lovely. And then I did an article for the tab. So Lucy got in contact, and yeah, I just find it really polarizing being Northern and working class at Durham. So I'm really grateful to talk about it.
Excellent, and I read that article as well, and it was really good. Jack.
Hiya, so I'm Jack. I'm a third year student at Durham. I'm also at Van Mildert College. I've sort of experienced a fair bit of what you call prejudice, what you call discrimination. And sort of originally I'd spoken with Lauren White, who'd compiled a report on the experiences of northern and working class and lower socio-economic background students. And I've given some of my experiences to Lauren to sort of compile that report. And I think that was featured in The Guardian a little while ago. And that sort of kickstarted a few bits and pieces, at least from the university's end. That was when the university aimed to change their student pledge. That now includes background, as well as, I think it's the 7 protected characteristics enshrined in UK law. And that means, you know, that now, at least at a sort of an, I'm looking for the word to say, but effectively discrimination that against someone's background, someone's accent, someone's, you know, northern working class culture would hopefully be treated with the same sort of severity as an instance of racism at the university. So that sort of kickstarted that. I'm hoping that things can change at an educational level as well, because we do have the sort of the protection against it there, but I'm hoping that we can aim for a bit of prevention of these issues. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. And anyone, I think only a working class person can come across as sort of someone who is relatable to the people while also saying socio-economic. So well done there. You can. And finally, we're going to come to Kelsi.
Hi, I'm Kelsi. I'm a second year criminology student with Lucy. We're on the same course, and we talk about these kind of things all the time. So when she asked me if I wanted to come on the podcast, I was like, yeah, definitely, I'll come and talk about it, because we talk about these sort of things quite often when we notice things in lectures and stuff. We have a little group chat where we'll just be like, did you notice this? So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, you're all extremely welcome. And now, at this point, I just want to hear about the sort of things. So you're at Durham University, which is one of the more prestigious universities in the country. Some people, you know, obviously seem to think that it's almost like a Hogwartsy type place, I suppose. And it's got that old-fashioned feel about it. But, like, you know, what attracted you to go to Durham University? And how's it been? So what was the idea behind it? How did you think it would be? And how is it actually? And do you have any experiences? And I'm going to shut up for a little bit, and I'm going to let any of you take over and tell us exactly what's going on, because we want to hear from you. We want to hear about like real stories, either that you've heard or that have happened to you, about the kind of, you know, the snobbery and the elitism that you face as working class students.
So I came to Durham first because obviously due to the reputation. I think that's a lot of thing that draws like students in. But I didn't even think I would get into Durham, but I ended up getting a contextual offer, which Durham is good for doing, but at the same time, when you get here, it's a completely different story. So some of my experience have been the first formal I ever had, which is just like an otherworldly experience anyway, the whole idea of a formal, like dressing up smart and these fancy dinners, and when you've never been in that situation, it's quite overwhelming. So at my first formal, people were asking me, so why do I have a job? Like, isn't that going to distract from my studies? Shouldn't I give that up if I want to do well at university? And when I mentioned about not replying to universities down south, because most of them had, and gone into Durham instead, because I said, well, it's really expensive down south, they looked at me like really weirdly, as if like to say, well, why is money an issue type of thing. And then one of the most notable things was we were at Ramside Hall, so obviously the waiters had the same accent as me. And one of the freps said to me, is it a strange situation to have the same accent as the waiters? And I was like, well, no, because they're from round here. Surely they have the same accent as the waiters where they live. So I was quite surprised at that. And one of the first things people said to me was asking what my parents did for a living. And it was just a very different world to what I was used to.
Can I just ask, what's a frep?
It's basically when you're in first year, either a second year or a third year comes for your freshers week and kind of is meant to like look after you and introduce you to the university. Well, wasn't very warming.
Okay, so the freps are there to help, and they're sort of laughing at you almost,
Yeah,
and saying, "How dare you have an accent that is the same as the people who are working here?" You know, it's yeah, I can see how that's unsettling. Would anyone else like to come in at this point and share their experiences?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. I've, been in my third year now. I've experienced enough, I'd say. I do quite a lot of work for the university at their open days. So as a student ambassador, a lot of that is wearing the purple shirt, sort of showing people around the university, because it's a place that I absolutely love. And it is a place that I want more and more people like me to come to, because I love it, and I think it should be open to more people from completely different backgrounds. Sort of setting the scene for it. Not even from students themselves, but from parents of students. I spent 10 minutes with a lady and her daughter discussing sort of the merits of the collegiate system that Durham has versus somewhere else, another university. And she topped off this conversation just by asking if I actually studied at the university or if I was just employed there, because I sounded too local, as she put it. That was one of my first sort of real experiences of it in first year, as well as again in Freshers Week. There was a sort of, our college hired out some of the clubs in Durham to make it a little bit more of a social atmosphere, in that you would see people that you were getting to know because you just moved into that place. And midway through one of the nights, a girl came up to me, and for as politely as I can paraphrase it, she asked to sleep with me because she said it would be charity work, because that's what her friends say, that she's got a poverty fetish. And that was something that really hit me. Only recently, I didn't really realize what had actually been said there in terms of what that meant. It was only really this year, in sort of my third year, that I actually realized the gravity of what was said. And it's just little bits and pieces. I've had a lecturer, when we were in a seminar session, I had to repeat a string of numbers. As a physicist, I had to repeat the numbers 100, and I said 100 because you would. And the lecturer in front of 50 other students proceeded to go 1 which got quite a good laugh out of the rest of my peers, and it left me feeling quite small. But again, I didn't really realize what it was until quite recently, that it is actually discrimination. It does treat me differently because of how I speak, because of where I'm from. And it certainly wasn't something where I had realized it had affected me, but I didn't realize what it was. So I think I'm sort of a bit late to the party in actually realizing that this is discrimination and it's not fair. But I do think I've experienced quite a bit of it at this point.
I can't believe the charity work comment. That is pretty low, isn't it? It's pretty horrible. It's
one
nasty.
of the more backhanded comments I've ever had in my time, to be honest. I certainly didn't take her up on the offer.
Well, it sounds like you haven't really missed out, to be honest. Okay, I'm sure other people have got stories if you want to come in.
I was going to mention, and I'm sure the people who aren't from the local area who came here are working class probably agree, but I went to school in East London. It was 98% Black and ethnic minority and 100% working class. So I didn't have the luxury of knowing about the actuality of Durham, because the boys who would go and look around Durham who were Black would come back and go, I don't want to go there. So I didn't have any form of like anyone who I knew who was at Durham who I could message to. So I was coming in completely blind. And I think a lot of times it's the people from down south and the more middle class people. Durham's a very safe space for this type of person. So they can go and they know people in second and third year and they'll look after them and they'll show them the ropes. So it's essentially the second you get in the gate at Durham, you're kind of at a disadvantage from being like a working class student, because at best, you know, one person who's there, or maybe someone who went like 25 years ago. So immediately you're kind of in this hostile environment. And like Jack was saying, like this whole poverty fetish thing has definitely been a thing. I've had friends, you know, go home with people and in the morning they've said like, I could never take you home to my parents, you're a bit of rough, like if you didn't sound like that I could maybe consider going out with you. It's just like it's horrible, but like for a lot of people who are from like a more middle class background, it is a game, and it's like, I'm gonna get with this person. And it's weird, I think the imposter syndrome is so big in Durham because you do end up trying to live this like double life of like a Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, I'm quite lucky because I'm from Liverpool originally and I live in Liverpool now, but you wouldn't be able to tell unless I told you. So from people I've met from down south, you just immediately say London, but you don't expand on it, because I think a lot of the working class students in Durham, and especially the ones who I've worked with in my association, they want to just keep their head down. They're not the ones going out and antagonizing and going like, I'm working class, and trying to like make a big deal about it. But it's, you're forced to kind of get so defensive about it because you can be walking around anywhere, you can be in any nightclub in a smoking area, and someone will just find a reason to attack you. And that it's just like this attitude that's bred by a lot of better off people who come to Durham.
Big. I don't know. I think it's really important to tell people that working class people aren't just northern. There's plenty of working class people outside of the north. This is something we were discussing the other day with the Northern Independence Party. We're like, do we really want to leave all the working class people in London out of things? And it's a bit of an interesting dilemma, that one. But and knowing nothing about it whatsoever, that's pretty interesting. So like, it must have been a bit of a baptism of fire, I guess.
Yeah, you just come in and you've just got to learn so much in the space of a week. Like, I didn't know what matriculation was. Like, it's just that it wasn't like, so many words are in my vocabulary now, like random words like FREPS or matriculation, and they just weren't before I came to university. But more people seem to know about it if they're from a more middle class position.
Okay. So let's see. Kelsi, you haven't said anything yet about this one. So would you like to tell us any of your experiences?
I was just thinking about a time when a couple of people I was friends with in my first year, one of them actually referred to me as, I think I opened the door for him and he said, "Thank you, servant." And I just remember thinking he would have never, ever, ever said that to any of the other people who was there. And I was like, why would he say that to me? Because and the only reason I could think is because I've got an accent, and because he knows I'm working class, that there's no other reason that he would say that to me, and not to, it was just really strange comment.
He might have just been a knob, but you know, there's always that. And Aoifke.
Yeah, I think for me, so like I said, I study English, and to study subjects like this at Durham, or study at Durham in general, it requires a lot of pre-existing knowledge. And like Lucy, I got a contextual offer, so I got my offer lowered by 2 grades, which is great because it took the pressure off. But I got to Durham and I told people, and people were like, "Oh yeah, I can see why you got that." And it's like, you know, I'm from a town called Selby, so it's just outside of York. It's got a very strong like mining and working class history, so I feel like it's very similar to Durham's history in that sense. And not many people go to uni from the town. It's got quite a low progression rate for further education. So it's like, yeah, fair enough, I got a contextual offer probably based off of that, but doesn't mean that I'm any less intelligent or, you know, anything like that. And I think for me, there's been so many experiences that I could talk about, like in freshers, having my accent made fun of, people being like, "Oh, I didn't realise that like they let Northerners or like state school students into Durham." And it's like, yeah, we do exist, we are actually clever, even though you don't think we are. But you know, I think with studying English, I'd be in seminars and tutorials where it'd only be me with this accent, surrounded by like 5 kids with southern accents, and clearly not working class southern accents as well. And obviously, like we said, there's working class students who aren't just northern, but they clearly sound like they obviously come from a private school. Fair enough, I'm not going to say anything against private school kids, so I'm all right. But it became very prevalent, their prejudices against me, when I would speak in seminars and my accent would be made fun of, or my opinion would be really, really put down because it was probably not seen as being as well founded. It'd be mimicked, and I'd read words aloud and I'd pronounce them wrong because I'd never heard them said aloud before, because I'm not from an area where there's lots of cultural capital, I guess, or compared to kids at private schools where they probably hear lots of intelligent words and vocabulary, or like kids come to Durham from a private school education and from a upper class education where they have lots of cultural capital, so they've read texts that are very obscure and classics and things like that. And for me personally, I didn't even know those texts existed. So when we'd be talking about things, they'd be like, "Oh, how come you haven't read that?" And it's like, well, I've had to do quite a bit of catching up to even be considered at this university that doesn't really let state school kids in. So things are going to be different for me, but it doesn't mean that I'm any less intelligent. And I think it's just a lot of putting down and a lot of prejudice against northern and working class students when we deserve to be here just as much as others, and we probably worked just as hard, or quite honestly a lot harder, to get here, even if we do get contextual offers, which mean we have to get lower grades. But yeah, that's mainly been my experience.
I think you've also got to think about the fact is there may be contextual offer, and I think a contextual offer is where people from maybe a less well-off, is that right? Less well-off backgrounds are given access to the university, but then again, people with a lot more money are kind of, maybe it's not Durham University, but I know it does happen there. But like, say, Toby Young, for example, well-known idiot, will consistently harp on about how clever he is, but he got into Oxford because of his dad. He got, or Cambridge or wherever he went. He got in there on like 3 C's at A level, or a C and a D or something like that. He got into the top university in the country because of who his dad was. We've got a lovely troll at the moment on Twitter, so it's really nice to see you, Shusty, whoever you are. Just having a go at English people, which is a bit weird, really, because but anyway, it's nice to see you. Dear me, I'm sure we can drown that out with positive comments, and there's been loads of positive comments in there as well, like people quite shocked at the things that you've experienced, and pretty angry as well, pretty angry about how these things are happening. So like, I don't think people really understand how challenging it can be for someone from a working class background. So I guess all of us on here came from a pretty ordinary background, went to pretty ordinary schools and did pretty ordinary things. Now, when you turn up, and I remember one of my friends went to Durham, he went to Hatfield College, and he had to turn up and go to a formal dinner straight away, and he had to wear like a cape, and they had to bring wine for the master or something like that. And I'm like, what is going on here? So we ended up like turning up in capes in solidarity with him, but they were like Batman and Robin, and he had to come dressed as Superman, and it really didn't go down very well. They didn't have very much of a sense of humour about us ridiculing their very silly thing. So yeah, what's that like, going there and having to attend these weird things, and also if you haven't got a lot of money behind you, how does it feel, like having to bring a bottle of wine or something? I don't know if that still goes on, and that's something that you'd still have to do.
For my first formal, we didn't have to bring a bottle of wine, or at least I didn't bring one anyway. But the gowns themselves are quite expensive. So some colleges are gown and some aren't, but mine was, and the gowns are like 50 quid on their own. Even for a used one, it's like 35, and a lot of it's like quite so even some people don't live in the college as well. Like, I stayed at home because uni's only down the road, and it was far too expensive to stay in the accommodation. But so if you're not living there, it's even harder at formals, because you get given like basically you make your own seating plan. So if you haven't made friends within like the first few days, it's quite a lonesome experience as well. But it was just very strange having to dress up in a gown, and it's fancy food and just a entirely different culture.
And do you have to like pay for everything? So if you're going for this fancy food, is this something that you would be excluded from if you couldn't afford it?
So my college has a levy that you have to pay to attend formals, which was about £100. So it was, yeah, pretty expensive.
Yeah,
At least in my experience, it's varied depending upon each college. At least at Van Mildert, we are what's classed as one of the more modern colleges, in that we're not gowned. The formals are a little bit more relaxed in that respect. We also have a JCR levy, so the levy goes into funding the junior common room, which is effectively a smaller students' union within each college, and that aims to subsidise some of the events like formals, but they're still not free at Van Mildert. I know for some colleges like St John's and I think maybe St Chad's, I'm not too sure, they are completely free, and it's quite a disparate experience depending on which college you can be at, and it can sort of feel a bit funny in that respect, in that you can speak to someone who you would expect to have had the same experience with and not have the same experience at all. It feels quite strange to me that Lucy had such an experience that she had at a more traditional college because of how sort of strict it was in that respect, whereas to me it wasn't really at all. So it can feel quite almost like for want of a better word, a divide and conquer sort of thing, in that it splits people up and it makes people feel weird that even though you're in a strange environment, you're not all in a strange environment. You know, you split up in that respect, and it makes it's very unsettling, I think, is the easiest way I can put it across.
So, like, let's see what Jamie thinks about this as coming from outside the area, and and I think there's someone else as well, wasn't there, who wasn't necessarily from local to Durham. So you must have come in thinking you're probably going to meet a few people who are local people and quite a few people who are from Durham. So you're imagining that you might, get people who have northeastern accents. You probably called them Geordie before you came up here. So, like, how shocking was it when you ended up coming along and saying, just realizing that people didn't have those accents, and the accents were a lot more plummy, let's say?
Yeah. Obviously, like I said before, like I didn't know anyone who'd come to Durham, so I was very much going in blind. And my only uni experience was my dad went to Bangor, and Bangor's a very local university. Like usually it's people from Liverpool and Chester, and then the rest come from the local area. So he was saying, like, like I was almost preparing in some way. I was like researching into like Geordie language and stuff, and like trying to learn the slang already as a way to get a foot up. And then immediately, like, everyone I met in Freshers Week, who, like, I think I was quite lucky, as in I found people who were very much like me within the first week. But apart from them, like most people in my college were straight up like from Surrey or from just nowhere near the local area. And I think it's just really interesting because the whole town versus gown debate that happens a lot immediately became very apparent to me. Like even in the way I arrived here and I was like, okay, I'm going to start looking for a job. And I remember some people saying to me like, oh, well, the locals do them. Like, why would you work in a bar? Like the locals do that. You just go out and enjoy yourself. So I think there is very much like a visible hostility that you could feel as soon as you arrive. And it's like, we were immediately told, like, you don't go out on Saturdays. That's when locals go out, like stay in and go to your college bar that night if you want to drink. So it's almost like straight away, and that was like Frep saying that as well. And people were supposed to be given a good impression of the university, immediately telling us like stay away from locals, and like, well, the people from around this area, they're violent, like they'll get in fights with you if they hear your accent. And I've been working at the bar I work at for a year now, and the people who come in on a Saturdays when it's like the locals night are far nicer than when the students come in, and they're the actual ones who want to have a chat and get to know you more, versus the people who are coming from Surrey and from the home counties immediately just shut them off and don't even give them the time of day.
Aoifke, is that exactly how you felt about it as well?
Yeah, so none of my family's like been to a uni like Durham, so I did a bit of research and sort of like looked at what's it going to be like, and I knew that there was lots of issues with classism and like hostility towards Northerners, but when you get here, the problems are so prevalent within the institution. It's so weird. Like I remember, I felt like much of a feeling of like us versus them. Same as Jamie, I looked up a job. I actually looked up to go work at the bookshop in the cathedral, which is very typical English students. I don't judge, but I just thought it would be quite a good way of making money, which was seen as very, very strange by lots of people who I was surrounded by at college. And I worked over summer as well, which is not typically like a norm for a dumb student. A lot of people are like, oh, wouldn't you like going on a holiday and things like that? And it's like, no, I was earning money so I could go to uni and afford things. So it's definitely an us versus them, a town versus gown. I definitely felt, even though I'm obviously not local to Durham, I'm obviously got quite a strong accent, like a strong Northern Yorkshire accent. So when I was surrounded by locals, even if I was just at New Look buying like a top, I felt really at home there. I was like, oh, it feels so good to hear an accent that is a little bit like mine, because often you are just surrounded by people who sound so different and act so different. So like with formals, I know I'm at the same college as Jack, but to be fair, like I felt the same as Lucy in terms of I don't know if it's just me, it may be just me being a bit sensitive, like combined with everything else, but formals felt very much like an experience that wasn't really meant for me. Just the entire formation of it, like I was saying earlier to these guys, like I love wearing makeup, I love getting dressed up, like I'll do that all the time, I'll wear my heels, but turning up at like a table with like friends and like drinking wine and the whole 3-course meal, just it feels so isolating, and it feels like an experience that's not meant for like me or people like me. And I really love the collegiate system, but I definitely at times felt like sometimes a bit suffocated in it, like you couldn't really break away and get away from that JCR, or not that the JCR is like any problem or anything, but get away from that like cohort and meet other people outside. It felt very much like stuck in college, and I've met some really, really lovely people, and I feel like I've grown a lot from the experience. But at the time when uni's so overwhelming at first, it definitely felt a bit like surreal, with this accent, like surrounded by people who didn't sound the same.
Kelsi, do you relate to that? It almost sounds like the Durham University is a bit two worlds, and you're trying to walk a little bit in both. You find quite comfortable on the working class side of things, and quite comfortable on the Saturday night, the locals' night, in a way that maybe they're jealous. Maybe the people who they would love to go out on a Saturday night, but obviously would feel like they wouldn't be welcome.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think in my college, so that there's catered accommodation and self-catered accommodation as well. And I definitely think there was quite a big separation between people who were catered, so people who had much more expensive accommodation, um, and people who were self-catered tended to have different groups of friends. And I feel like there was definitely a divide between people who went to, quite prestigious boarding schools, and they would all be friends with each other, and that was it. Like there was no point in even trying to be friends with these groups of people. And I definitely found people that I related to, but there was definitely less people that I think were like me, or quite similar to me, than there were people who were quite privileged. Definitely.
So we've talked now about about the really negative things and that have happened there, and obviously I referred to that miners versus police thing that made quite big. I think it made national news, where a rugby club was banned in Durham. And I think Durham University would have liked that to have been the end of it. And I know there were a lot of really positive noises made by Durham University about how they want to engage more with the local area and be something that is beneficial to the local area in a much more real way. Have things changed since then? Because I'm not really sure. It sounds like they have, but I suppose the question is here: have things changed in a meaningful way, and what are Durham University doing to try and deal with this?
So I hadn't really noticed anything had changed until myself and the other sociology department wrote an open letter to Durham University about the treatment of northern and working class students. And to be fair, like they have been really passionate about getting involved and making a change, like because they got over 100 signatures or something within the department. So we've been talking about, and I've been in talks with the department leaders and the equality leader in Durham. And so we've come up with a few solutions for like just beginning things. So we've decided to meet with a lot more working class writers to create visibility. So inviting them in for guest lectures and seminars, so working class students feel like they have them being represented in lectures, not just the same kind of voice that you usually get in a university like this. And there's going to be like asking lecturers to volunteer to talk about their experiences in higher education who are working class, and hopefully put this on the website so like future students feel encouraged to go there, and that there is people like them at Durham University and making this visible, which is the most important thing. And in Freshers Week, you do bystander intervention, which is about tackling like racism, sexism, sexual harassment, homophobia, and things like that. So we've asked to insert classism in there and like educate people about Durham's rich culture and how this can impact people, and you know basically the miners' heritage and how it isn't just a joke to a lot of people. So that's just some of the things we spoke about. I think they're the most important things that have come up from it. So they have been passionate about it, but I'm just hoping that it goes university-wide, not just department.
Now, when I asked that question, there were a couple of shaking heads when I said, has there been any meaningful change? I was wondering if there's anyone who wants to come in on that one.
I'm happy to. Again, like I said earlier, I've been at Durham for 3 years now, so I've sort of seen a bit that I was a year after it was the Trevelyan College Rugby Club incident with the Thatcher, Bobbies and Miners social, very well planned. And there has, like you said, there's been big noise about it, at least from a sort of a bureaucratic standpoint, in, like I said earlier, with them making background a protected characteristic. But one thing that you see with the university, and it's in all types of discrimination, it's quite hard to actually report it. There's not, I remember growing up and being told about, people online who are going to be weird. There's always going to be a big red COP button in the corner that you can press to report it if you feel unsafe. There's nothing like that at Durham, at least, that I've experienced, that I've seen. It seems to be hidden away somewhere. It's quite hard to access in that respect. And I think that in itself is one of the biggest bottlenecks, is that it's actually really hard to understand how you're actually going to report it. If something does offend you, if something is discriminatory towards you, it's quite hard to actually speak out about it without maybe going and sending an email to someone and feeling quite exposed and quite sort of that you've put yourself out there. You're not anonymized in that way. It seems to be quite hard to actually make a positive change to a situation that's being thrust upon you in that way. So whilst they have made promises and have kept to them in that respect, it's quite hard to actually hold up your end of the bargain and actually be able to sort of report something that does make you feel uncomfortable, that does offend you.
Right. So kind of we've been pretty negative in a lot of ways so far, but I know that you've been doing really positive things. And I suppose, would I be right in thinking that the end goal is to try to make sure that working class people feel equally as comfortable as anyone else going to Durham University and feel like it's a place that's safe and welcoming to them? Is that your goal as your group?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I know most of the things I've done have just been for the sociology department, because that's what I'm in. So it's quite hard to take it university wide when I'm just in the sociology department. But hopefully, yeah, the end goal, I just want students to feel represented in the university, because it's a small amount, but there are people there like them, and I think creating that visibility is the most important thing.
Brilliant. Yeah, and so that's it. So what are you doing? What are you doing in the? I suppose, what are you doing tangibly to try and make that happen now? So I've seen the articles, I've seen what you're doing. What are you doing as a group that is going to help achieve these goals?
So one of the most feasible things that we're doing, we're hoping to create more student representatives surrounding issues like this. So people, like Jack said, people feel like they have somebody to go to instead of having to like basically email a lecturer. If they're not feeling comfortable with that, they can talk to somebody like them. And the website thing with putting lecturer experiences on and making that visible. But it's a big issue, and it's just obviously small things to try and tackle at the minute, but I'm hoping it gets built upon in the future. But that's what I'm doing. I don't know about other people.
Before I bring anyone else in, what a lovely comment there from Eve. I really appreciate you all. I wouldn't be at university at all if it weren't for Jack showing me there are people like me at Durham. So what a lovely comment to come in there.
Hi Eve, you're right.
Yeah, would anyone else like to come in on that? Like the tangible things that you're going to do to try and make sure, obviously you're doing them, because there's a comment just absolutely backing that up.
I know sociology. Sorry, Jamie.
You go first, Kelsi.
The sociology department has a first generation scholars network, which I think is really, really good. So anybody who classifies themselves as a first generation scholar can join. And they sort of have meetings every couple of weeks, and you can just talk about anything that they've experienced at Durham or anything they're not sure of, or pretty much anything that they want to talk about. But there's first years and second years and a few third years in there as well. So I've noticed that a lot of like the first years will ask me things about like, because I feel like at Durham they assume you know a lot of things automatically, and a lot of people just don't, like simple things, even sort of like the language that they use, or just how to reference or how to find certain information, and a lot of first years just don't know. And I noticed that a lot of them would ask me about it, and I thought it was quite nice to be able to just say to them like, oh, I was in the exact same position. And they do sort of assume that you know a lot of things that you're not, but you're not alone in that. There's a lot of people who do feel the same way, and just sort of give them a bit of guidance and let them know that like, you know, you're not on your own.
That is really good, and that this is really nice to see working class people looking after working class people, and I suppose that's a real positive. But you're going to need some backing on this one. I'm interested. The comments have been so largely positive. We do still have someone who's channel hopping to try and troll, which is a bit weird. I always think, what have you got? Like, what have you got in your life if that's your plan? But anyway, if that's what the people like to do, then that's I suppose that's up to them. But the positive comments have been really nice. What I'd like to see as well is I'd like to see some questions of this panel, because I've been asking some questions and they've been answered absolutely brilliantly. So I'm going to have to crowdsource that now. What questions can we ask of the panel? Because we do really like to have audience interaction here. So please do put comments in the chat. Everyone can see the chat, I think. So we'll be able to see the questions as they come in. So right, what could Durham University do itself? So what do you want from Durham University itself?
I just want them to actually like acknowledge it, really. That would be the first good step, because at the minute we tend to tell them and then they're like, okay, we'll have like a department meeting, and then it just gets forgotten about. It happens with a lot of issues, and sometimes it feels like the university often doesn't acknowledge things until it hits big media. Sometimes it's the same with I think it happened with Lauren's report, that there wasn't much talk about it until it got in the Guardian by the university. So I just think acknowledging it will be a good start, and then working with students to ensure change happens, instead of just focusing on like doing it themselves, because it's the students that are experiencing it, not the lecturers.
We've got a question. We've got a question here from Laura. Is there a way to organise like a union and get reps in each department? And I suppose that leads to another question as well. Is the student union acting like a student union, or is it acting like an all boys club? Is it what's the student union role in this?
My role as president of Working Class Associations is I'm the one who deals with the SU a lot. And to answer Laura's one, that's what we've been doing pretty much all this year. Last year we had someone great, Neve, who's been on the show before, and she was very vocal on doing a lot. But obviously because of the pandemic, I've not been able to do as much. So I have been focusing a lot on trying to get a rep in each college. But even that, like Durham as an institution, they don't want to call them working class reps. I don't know why, but certain colleges have had like they just won't call it working class reps. But I think the SU, out of everything in Durham, is the thing that's changing the most for the best. The SU president Sean, she's amazing, and we're seeing a lot of like this old boys club thing turning away from it. So I think we've just got to keep that up. We've got to keep people like Sean in the SU and not let it fall back into old habits, because every SU election there is someone who runs representing old Durham and is like in with the union. And I think if they got in again, I think it would probably have a really bad knock-on effect on the rest of Durham. So the momentum started, but I'm still skeptical if they could keep it up or not.
I suppose it's down to votes, and it's down to that positive action taken at that level. Other people had actually come in as well and said, is there anything the student union can do? Lilith Gentis had come in and said that. Are there any students you know involved in Acorn? Well, I imagine you do know some, because you do know Neve. So yeah, is that something that you've been interested in as well, as like sort of a renters union?
I know a few people that have tried to get involved in stuff like that, but it's just been so like difficult at the minute with everything going on. But yeah, I do know there's a lot of people who are involved with it.
Can I just say on that point as well that the Durham rent is horrible, and it's caused by the university, because the university charged such high prices. We end up having to pay £500 a month for a building that's full of mold and is literally falling apart at the seams. So yeah, I think that like Acorn, we don't have an Acorn in Durham, I think, but if anyone from Acorn's watching and would like to get in touch, I think it would be we constantly talk about rent strikes in a lot of the like working class left wing groups in Durham, but we've never actually done anything tangible, and I think that would maybe be the next step going forward.
It's pretty good news. Someone commenting as well, you must be doing some good work tonight with the trolls out in force, but we are dealing with them over the time. But people are saying such positive things. There's a really nice one about Lucy coming in. Let's see, it's back a little bit, but yeah, someone was really positive about you anyway, and I will find it in there. We do have a really good question as well. Do you feel from Stephen Greenwood, do you feel the old establishment of universities are endangered in the light of younger, more inclusive people? Will their reputation of recent troubles cast a shade on its prestige?
I'm happy to have a go at that. I don't think it will necessarily do that completely, because as an academic institution, Durham is brilliant in terms of being research led. You know, it has all those attributes of being a very good academic institution. The problem is the people attending the academic institution, and probably the problem is the society that brings those boys and girls up. The society that tells them that they're inherently better than me or other people like this, instead of actually pointing out the box that they're standing on when they're comparing themselves to me. That's one thing that I think is probably going to be deconstructed, or at least I hope is going to be deconstructed, is that people are often mistaking their the steps forward they take, or the head starts they have, as being better. And I think the issues that we're highlighting, the work that we're doing, will hopefully highlight that it's because you've got a head start. And not to say that you haven't achieved what you've achieved, but I've not had that head start and I've achieved what you've achieved. So I should be given the same credence as you're given, and I shouldn't be discriminated against because I've achieved the same thing you've achieved. So I think that will hopefully be deconstructed. I don't think the idea of universities and institutions like themselves will necessarily be taken apart and their reputation be lowered, because they have their academic backing that is brilliant, that attracts people like me, that attracts people who like to have a go at me. So I think hopefully the reputation will dim, because the reputation that Durham is bad will dim because Durham becomes better.
Just on a personal note here, where do you feel student fees fit in with all this? Do you think that is going to exclude more and more working class people, and therefore could put at risk the improvements that you're personally making and and that momentum might disappear because people will be saying, well, I don't want to get into that much debt. I'll do an apprenticeship, I'll become a plumber, or I'll do something like that. Do you think that could be an issue? Aoifke?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's,
Oh,
oh no!
sorry.
It's just so Aoifke's laughing. Sorry, nodding, not laughing, nodding.
Very quick. But, I was just thinking because obviously, I mean, it's changed now, but when we were applying, you put down your choice of college and then you often got given a different one. There's new colleges now, but when I was applying for Durham, there was 3 colleges that were self-catered, I believe. And they're like I don't know for definite, like £2,000 less for accommodation. And if you don't get those colleges, you're at a college that is catered and is £2,000 more. So it's like, I might be wrong, but like it's like £7,000 for rent in Durham, and it's getting higher and higher. Like there's been, I don't know what numbers you had, that 8.
Yeah, it is 8. It is 8. That was 8.
Oh, perfect. I got my glasses on. But yeah, so like up to £8,000 in rent, and it's like that's over the maximum student finance loan that you can get, which I think is 7,500. If that's wrong, Jack will do speak. And so it's it's so inaccessible for working class students who or even just people who don't even get the full amount of student loan, but still can't afford to pay the difference. And so if you don't get your self-catered college and you get a catered college, you're not going to be able to go. But also the self-catered colleges are so expensive. So it's like when I was applying to Durham, I was like, can I definitely afford this? Or could I go somewhere else where I can cook my own food, which, I like to do. Might not be very good, but I like to do it. And go to a uni that is good, and I'm not being put in a accommodation that's so expensive. But yeah, I'm sorry, Lucy, you're gone.
I was just going to basically say the same as you. I think it is putting a lot of students off, is basically what I was going to say.
Do you think, like, as well, the difference between knowing that you can afford to go there and not get into debt, or that debt will not particularly matter to you, is something that puts like people who are wealthy at a massive advantage? Do we think that's something that troubles people and troubles working class people?
I think so, at least. And I think one thing that is never explained well enough to people who are applying to university is that the debt you can get in for university is the best kind of debt you will ever get in your life. That if you only have to pay off a fraction of it each year, depending on if you earn over a certain amount. I think it's, if you earn over 26 grand a year, you pay off 9% of whatever you earn over that thing. And, after 30 years, it's wiped off. But that's never explained correctly. And you have people who have had real visceral experiences of debt in their community or personally, hearing the word debt, and they think, there's no way I can do that. I can't do that to myself. I've seen those negative experiences where you have other people who are from more affluent socioeconomic backgrounds who either haven't had visceral, painful experiences of debt or have had it explained better to them. They know it's not actually a risk. And I think that's one thing that really puts off, and it put off some of my friends from applying to university, is that it was never quite explained. And then instead you just have this big, heavy emotional word of debt that hangs over a potential degree. I think really puts off a lot of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds.
The next one we've got some other questions coming in. We've got, do we know the ratio between students from state school and students from public school at Durham? We do know that one.
Yes, this is one of the facts I have to know as part of my work. It is, so you've heard of the 93% club, being that 93% people are state educated, whereas 7% are public private school educated. The number shifts to 63% of students at Durham are state educated, whereas 38% are public privately educated. So there's a big shift. Okay,
great. I'm glad you had that statistic at hand as well. Well done. And we've had another question which is really good from Joe McVeigh. Have any of you crossed the class barrier and made friends from a different social background? I guess we'll go through the whole panel there.
Uh, I don't tend to ask people their social background, but I mean, I probably have ended up being friends with people who aren't working class just off being at Durham, because I have no problem with talking to people from different backgrounds. Like, this isn't meant to be an attack on anybody, because I think it's fine as long as you acknowledge that privilege that you have, then I have no issue with it. So yeah, probably.
Yeah. How does everyone else feel? Have you met people from, like, because we're not saying that every person from a well-off background is a horrendous person. It's just like, on average, the treatment can be a little bit worse, can't it? And I think as well, before we came on air, you were talking about like people's reaction to you having jobs, and this disbelief at the idea that you would have to work. Do you all work? Do you all have jobs?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Every single one of you has a part-time job, and how do people treat you around having a job?
Well, I got told like I was telling you all earlier, I got told in Freshers Week that I should probably quit my job because I'm not going to do well on my degree if I keep carrying on with my job. So that was quite a shock. I was like, yeah, I would love to, but
yeah, like it's a choice. Anyone else have any experiences around that?
Yeah, I mean, like you pointed out, it's sadly it's a minority ruining it for everyone, really. The vast majority of people that you meet at Durham, regardless of the background, are lovely. But the thing is, like you say, when they make enough noise, it gets too noisy and it starts to hurt. I had quite a negative experience in my first year. I don't know if I said it on air or off air before, but as I work for the university in their open days, I was actually photographed by some people in my college when I was at work, and it was put through a group chat and shared around and laughed at that I was actually at work. And I just think that was very unfair. It was very shocking to see that when someone had shown it to me and said, this is what's being said. So yeah, I think to echo Lucy's experience, that people don't understand why you would have a job at university.
A couple more questions and then we're going to do like maybe a closing statement from you all. So have a little think, have it ticking over in your brain. If you want to put any message out there before we end tonight, have something ticking over in your brain, because we're going to come to all of you. It can be long, it can be short, it is up to you. So we've got a question around, does any of us support writing off student debt? Is that a thing? Because I have like loads of socialist opinions on this one, but like I'm going to come to the actual students who may know more than me. Yeah, lots of nods there. Anyone want to comment on the writing off of student debt?
Well, I can't see any cons to it personally.
Yeah.
I think people don't really realise what happened with student debt, because although it is, like as Jack said earlier on, one of the best types of debt you can get into, because it ends up becoming a greater tax if you earn more. However, it was just a little trick. It was like, so they know most of it will be written off at some point. It'll just make you feel terrible about it for 30 years. And it was just a little trick to try and make sure that the national debt looked smaller under George Osborne and David Cameron. That was all it was. It was just a little bit of economic deceit, really. Right, and let's see, are there any others that have come in? Just the statistics are awful. People are saying people are massively grateful for hearing this discussion tonight. They think you're absolutely incredible, so that's good. And okay, a local Tory MP in County Durham calls it a graduate tax. Would you agree that it is a graduate tax, and if so, would it be a fair graduate tax? Don't know. It's a tough question, that one. Yeah.
I would say I do agree that it is a graduate tax, but maybe it needs to start being called that so that people understand that it's not a debt. Because if we change the language around it, it becomes more accessible, because you remove the emotional language that is the word debt, and if you turn it into a tax, everyone's taxed. So maybe if we were to word it in a better way, it would be more attractive to people in the region, because I know that's probably what she's trying to hint at there.
How do you feel as well about how how they keep on being sold off. So this is Jane Strange has just made a comment about how the student finance was actually sold off to private companies who've put the interest up, and like the interest on them, it's criminal, really, isn't it? 6%. 6%, like no one, like you could go out and get a loan most places now, which would be less than that. And I know you don't necessarily have to pay it off, but it sort of means you might never pay it off. Yeah.
I think there's like a lot of, I don't really know much about taxes, I'm not very good at economics, but I think, you know, when you leave uni, this is something that I've just noted myself, but there's a lot of inaccessibility for jobs and job sectors. So I do English, and I'm thinking about going to publishing or journalism. That might require a master's, that might require me having to live near London. For me, I wouldn't be able to travel to London. I'd have to take up rent in London compared to people who would be on the same starting wage but maybe live with their parents, or maybe would have help from their parents. So I feel like the tax itself is probably very, you know, if you're doing the same job for the same salary, but you're getting taxed the same, but different, you know, circumstances. But I don't know if that made sense, to be fair.
Oh yeah, it does make perfect sense, and thank you for that. Right, so I'm going to move to the last question. I've actually changed my mind on what the last question is. You can feel free to make your closing comments as well, anything you want to get across as well. But I'm going to come to each in turn with this question, and there's a really good question that I'm not going to be able to do. So I think that's Gregor. Sorry, I can't come to that one, and it is an outstanding question. But Michael Thompson, what would you say to other working class students contemplating a place at Durham next year? In hindsight, would you still choose Durham personally, or do you wish you've accepted a place elsewhere? I think that's a really good question. And then also any closing comments that you might have. And I'm going to come to Kelsi first, if that's okay.
I'd say that it's really important that working class students do keep coming to Durham, because if they don't, then there's never going to be any change. I think there definitely are some disadvantages to being working class and being at Durham, but Durham is an incredible university, and having a degree from Durham is a massive benefit. And I don't think that I definitely wouldn't turn it down or change my mind about it. Now, like looking back on how it's been, I think some of my lecturers, especially in the sociology department, are some of the most inspirational people that I've ever come across. And I think I'd definitely go to, if I had to choose again, I'd definitely still go to Durham, despite of some of the things that I don't really like about it. That the pros definitely outweigh the cons, I'd say.
Brilliant, thank you, and that's really nice to know as well. Jamie?
Yeah, for the first couple of months, it was always in the back of my mind, like, I wish I'd have gone Nottingham. It's not as good a uni, but I would have had a way better time probably. But I think when you start sticking it out and you find, you know, no matter what university you go to, you're going to find people who are like-minded to you. And I was very lucky to find a group of friends who are really similar to me and have made me feel very welcoming. But also when you stop viewing your lecturers and your seminar leaders as like scary people, and you actually start getting to know them, especially if you're left wing, you'll realize like a lot of them are really nice. And you know, when you get to know your lecturers, you'll find that they're very much on your side and they don't represent the institution, like the higher up version of Durham. So I'd tell people, yeah, do still come. Hopefully it's getting better. But no matter what uni you're at, as long as you can really just find people who are like you and are like-minded to you, I think you can have a good time, and it's just what you make of it yourself.
Brilliant, thank you. Aoifke?
I think it's a bit of a difficult one, and I think every circumstance is individual, and you know, it's all everyone's individual experiences. I definitely spent the first term like Jamie looking at Nottingham and being like, why didn't I go there, and looking up like what I could do to maybe leave Durham and things like that. It was quite a tough time because I felt so isolated. I'm glad I stuck it out, because I think, you know, if you're in a place where you're not wanted or you don't feel represented, stick it out, because that's going to be a place that you make the most change and make the most noise. And I think, you know, things like this are probably something that first term me would have never thought I'd ever done, but I'm really glad that like I'm doing it, even if it is nervous speaking in like your regional accent. I say when you're working class kids, like definitely apply, but don't feel shame in the fact that, or like don't feel like you're letting yourself down if you want to go to a uni that you feel more represented at, because ultimately it's your uni experience and it's not up to you to have to go through like trauma to like get a degree. But also I really hope that we're going to be making change and making things better, because even just being here today makes me feel so validated in how I feel, and I wish first term me had realised I wasn't alone in it. And just, you'll find your people as well. You'll be right.
Brilliant. Jack?
I have to sort of echo what Kelsi, Jamie and Aoifke have said in that, really, in that, you know, I would still say to come, definitely, you know, because it's sadly a very small minority, and I did say that it ruins it for people. It doesn't ruin the entire thing, not at all. It is a small thing, or not a small thing, but it's infrequent is what I would say. But the thing is, it hurts a lot and it adds up in the long run. But I would say to that if you are considering that you don't feel represented, sometimes you might have to be your own representation. You know, you might have to represent yourself, and you might have to be strong in that respect. But it is something that's probably societal, really, and it would be reflected at any place, really, and at any workplace as well. So it does mean that we maybe have to be braver than our southern counterparts, but we maybe just have to do that, and we've got to take pride in being that brave person in the room.
Excellent. And I'm going to ask Lucy to make the final comment, as the person who we first noticed and inspired this show tonight. Not that she's better than anyone, by the way, because we're all the same, aren't we, in working class societies? Lucy.
I was in the same situation as Jamie. Like, the first few months I was like, oh God, like I wish I went somewhere else. It would have been better. Seeing all my friends have more fun at like Newcastle or Northumbria was quite difficult. But I don't think I would change it, because like it's made things like this happen for future prospective students. And if I can make them feel comfortable, then I've done my job, in my opinion, really. And like, privilege is like really intersectional with things, and it's like I've really found at Durham, people aren't afraid to like benefit from their privilege, but they're always afraid to address it. And I just think you need to just accept your privilege isn't like a bad thing if you accept it and learn from it and platform other voices that aren't as privileged. Because even I'll have privilege, but I know this and I educate myself on. I don't pretend that I don't, and that's when it becomes an issue. So I just think, like, it's not shameful to be middle class or not Northern or whatever else. You just need to like know that you're privileged because of this and help others flourish with it. So yeah, I don't think I would change anything, because it's got me to where I am, and I'm happy. Like, I deserve to profit from a really good education just as much as anybody else. So I'd really encourage working class students to come to Durham even still, because like everybody said, they'll find their people and they will do well. There's people there to look after them now. So yeah, definitely. I don't think I'd change anything.
Well, that is good to hear, and it's really good to hear your positive experiences. On behalf of Socialist Think Tank, I really want to thank you for coming on tonight, because it's been a massive pleasure to amplify your voice and to try and like get that voice heard, because that's what we're all about here at Socialist Think Tank. Please do like, share and subscribe to all of our things. You can become a member as well of Socialist Think Tank. It is free to become a member, but we do accept donations as well. You will not get any special privileges for donating though, because we are a socialist channel, and we want people to be involved and pay in as much as they possibly can and not feel like they're going to lose out if they can't afford to do it. So that's my little housekeeping thing, I suppose. Hello, I have to say hello, Kieran, because one of my students has found me. So hello, Kieran, I hope you're okay. And thanks for the nice comments. We've had a really good time tonight. Let's hope, please do feel free to get in contact and let us know if you ever want to come back on, if you ever want to do anything, because we are definitely in full support of everything you're doing, and I will see you again soon. Or don't go anywhere, by the way. I'll continue chatting to you in a second, but we're going to stop streaming now.
Keep the red flag flying.